All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started. I know there might be a couple of people coming in late that I know of. So here's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to go through some teaching stuff. Some of it's technical, some of it's more philosophical, why we shoot, those kinds of things. And then afterwards, if you brought your own gear, you can talk to either our resident pro, Eric Reese here, or talk to myself if you need if you need a hand with settings or anything like that. And then since the band is doing worship rehearsal tonight, if you want to shoot, then we have a chance to practice shooting. If you want to just pay attention to this and learn some of this, then you'll get some great content out of this. Also, I am recording it, so I am going to try to get this to any of our team members who weren't able to make it, and anybody else online. I had a couple of friends my brother-in-law is a missionary in Honduras, and he was asking about this. He obviously couldn't be here, so hopefully this can help some people out. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. So this is our first Hope Church photography and videography intensive. And when I say photography and videography, we're mainly going to be talking in photography terms. But the way we shoot today, most of our cameras, the settings are very similar. So a lot of the settings can be, they will work for either photography or videography. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just go through just a couple of things about why we're doing this in the first place, why this even matters. So I understand that everybody in this room, no matter what your skill level is, you've all got different styles. You're going to look different. You're at different levels of experience and all those things. We're all growing as photographers. And our goal here at the church is we want to have a standard, a certain look that we're going for, but we also want to celebrate your unique style. So I want to challenge you to see who you are, and you're going to learn from us, you're going to learn from other guys, but I want to challenge you to discover who you are as well, because we want your creativity to be a part of our culture here at the church. So just kind of give you a little bit of an idea, I love following other photographers and other churches. So this church right here is called The Belonging Company. They are in Nashville, Tennessee. Pastors came from New Zealand. They were, if you ever heard of the band Planet Shakers, they were part of that. They came and they started this church. Carrie and Cody Carnes go to this church. So it's a really cool church. I love their look. So it's one of those churches I will look at their style, and I'm trying to learn and grow from these guys. Another church that does a fantastic job would be obviously Hillsong Church. So the reason I show you this is try to follow some of these churches, especially if you shoot for the church. Try to follow some of them and learn some style and get some ideas. Anna will send me a photo every now and then and be like, "Oh, I love this look. I love this. I want to know how to capture this." And so it's a good idea to learn from other people. This guy, Andy Barron, is a photographer. He's a Christian photographer, but he shoots concerts, events, and he's a fantastic photographer, so I follow him as well. So you can learn a lot from guys who just work in the concert space as well. So most of what I'm going to talk to you about today has to do with that kind of a shoot, a live event shoot, but some of the principles kind of go back and forth. So we're going to talk a little bit about why we shoot, why do we capture, why are we doing this at all? Why does it matter that we have a photography team? Really, the reason that we're doing this, I want you to understand that if you serve as part of this team, your role is really important, because you capture what God is doing in that moment. You capture what God was doing that day or during that event. So even though you are behind the scenes, we value you and what you bring to the team. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit is why do we capture? Well, we want to highlight impact. And what is impact when we talk about that? Lives changed by Jesus Christ. People that their life was one way and now they're another, and you can see them in the presence of God, or the joy on their faces. They're interacting with other people. We want to capture that, and we want to show our valley and show the world man, something is happening here. This place is alive, and this is exciting to be a part of this church and this culture. So here's a couple of examples. I'm going to show you a lot of photo examples today from our church, a lot of examples that we're going to have really good examples, but I'm also going to show you a few mistakes that most of them are my photos that I'll show you how I can make a mistake, and we'll show you what to look for. So in this photo, one of the reasons I love this photo is it's showing people encountering God. it's people encountering God in a real way. One of them is in a worship setting. The other one, this just happened in our lobby a couple of weeks ago, where someone was being prayed over in the lobby, and it was just a really cool encounter that our photographer that day happened to capture. This moment too is a really cool moment where you see like, man, like, and it's not like, as a photographer, you always want to be kind of behind the scenes, and you want to hide a little bit if you can, because it enables you to capture moments like this. But man, this is the kind of stuff that matters. It's not just about promotion, even though that's part of our job. It's about, we want to lift up Jesus and show people that Jesus is changing lives through and at our church. Although a lot of it does have to do with promotion. We're capturing a lot of these events, and we use these photos later. We'll use them for branding, or we'll use them as a recap or something like that. This photo right here is a really cool photo from actually this last Sunday that just shows like, hey, look at the life in the lobby. Look how much fun we were having that day. So I'll show you like why we capture different perspectives and all just in a second. But I mean, it just shows like, hey, there's a lot happening. This is fun. And then same day. So all these guys, we just grab these guys together, and it just shows like, hey, what does it say to you? If you're looking at this image, this church has fun, right? Like they're having a good time. They appreciate sports and all of that. And then this image as well that we captured of some ladies this Sunday right after church. It's like, there's life. Like these women love being a part of this body. And then I love this photo too that somebody captured of Elvis. And like, it's not actually saying a whole lot about what our church is other than we're having fun, and we happened to capture this guy. I mean, I was shooting video this week. He didn't realize he was shooting video, and he came out and made a face like that to me, because this happened like 2 weeks ago. But he did this again, like it's kind of his thing whenever he sees a photographer. But it was a lot of, it just shows like, hey, we're fun. We've got fun people here. So I want to go through, so that's part of why we capture. So why are we capturing? We want people to see lives change. We want people to see the life of this place, and that we have passion and joy, and there's a sense of family. And really, like, everybody desires that. Everybody desires fun and purpose and being a part of something bigger than themselves. And you get to capture and tell our valley and the world that, like, hey, this is the kind of place where that happens. So now let's talk about what we capture. So now that we kind of have an idea of why we capture things, there's a purpose behind it, let's talk about what we capture, okay? So when we talk about what we're capturing, we're going to be capturing the weekend. So we're going to be shooting for the weekend. Sometimes it's always going to be photography. We're always going to have a photographer every weekend. Sometimes it's going to be videography. And the reason that we'll do video is going to be if it's a bigger event, it's going to be Easter, it's going to be Christmas, it's going to be something happening that you might promote in the future and you might need video for, or you want to recap to show people like how great of a time we had. We're not going to do a video recap every Sunday, but that's going to be occasionally. So we're going to shoot our weekends, our events. If we do some kind of a missions thing, those are the kinds of things we're going to shoot. So when we're shooting on the weekend, here's a few things that you're gonna want to shoot. And by the way, all of this stuff is listed. If you're a photographer at Hope Church, we have a guidelines page on our website that is like a checklist for the kinds of things we want to capture every week. So every week that you're scheduled, you can follow that guidelines link and you'll see that list there. But I'm going to go through it with you guys right now. So we're going to capture things during the worship service like the preacher. We're going to capture the host. We're going to capture the worship leaders. We're going to capture kids ministry. We're going to capture life in the lobby, things like that are happening. So, and that's going to look different every single week, but we want those images to pull from to say, here's kind of what happened this weekend. And you know what, here's a great way to think about it. If you come in and you were trying to tell someone what happened that weekend through photos only, how would you tell that story? So as you are thinking about whenever you're shooting, what are you seeing that helps to tell someone the story of that weekend? So you come in and you see someone is greeting someone, they're handing out coffee, or someone's in a coffee shop. Hey, I'm going to capture some of that. You're going to see worship and people lifting their hands and an encounter with God. I'm going to capture that. You're going to see the message and a response. I'm going to capture that. So you want to think about it as a story. I'm telling a story today through the pictures that I'm capturing. And it is a good idea for you to know what you're walking into. Sometimes There can be an event that's happening, like for instance, if it's a special event, especially, we're going to have some things that we want to make sure we capture that we don't want to miss. So you want to be there early, and you want to go through Planning Center and see what are the songs, what are the special events. Come to me and ask me on that Sunday, is there anything I need to be aware of? And I'm going to make sure that you know, here's the things you want to make sure that you capture today. So those are the kinds of things you want to make sure, because here's the thing, as a photographer, you have the power to include or exclude whatever you want. So just like with framing, like I could be taking a photo of this camera only, or I could take a photo including everything else on this table, and whatever people see is the story I want them to see, right? So you do the same thing with that morning. You get to include or exclude whatever you want. So how people remember that day is really, it's up to the photographer. So you want to make sure that you're ready for and you understand what we want to capture that day. So here's the one that we're going to spend the most amount of time on. So how do we capture those things? How do we capture it? So we'll go into some tech stuff a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit of what kinds of shots we want to get. So this is going to be fun, and I'm going to show you a lot of pictures here. So how we capture things, and this is important because, like it says right here on the screen, if you don't know your equipment and what settings do what, you're going to be a pretty frustrated person. So you want to know your gear. You want to know how to get the thing that's in your head. Sometimes you have a picture in your head and you're like, oh, I'd love to get this. But you're like, I don't even know how to get that. It's too dark in this room, or it's too bright, or so I don't know how to get my camera to capture this moment. So you want to be ready for it. So let's talk about some practical things. What are we looking, how are we capturing? So here's the 3 things I'm looking for every message, every worship service, every time that you're in the lobby. I want a wide, a medium, and a close shot of all of it, okay? Of all those different things. Now, what does that mean? If I'm capturing a wide, a medium, and a close shot, this is an example from this Sunday. So there's a wider shot that's going to capture some people that are sitting there, and then you can see a medium shot is more like a full body shot, and then you have a closer one, and you can even go wider and closer than that. A lot of times we'll go much wider, and I'll show you some wider ones in a second that show like the whole auditorium, and really it tells a story of like, oh, this is how many people were here today. This is where people were sitting, those kinds of things. So it can really help to tell the story. So you want to make sure that and the reason you're capturing a wide shot, if you ever watch like a show on TV, especially a city show, or even a Western, they'll always start off with like a wide shot to show you we're in New York City, or we're in the desert, or whatever, and it just shows you, here's where we are. And then it'll usually go to like a medium shot or a close shot to say, here's what's happening in the environment that you're in. Most of the time, those wide shots that you see on those shows were not even shot by those companies, like by the director or the videographer or whatever, for the cinematographer for those shows. It's like a company that just shoots wide shots all the time. So, but you have to think, it's stock agencies that do that. But you have to be thinking that I want to capture a wide one. So we're going to talk through lenses in a little bit, and Eric will dig into this some too, but you can have different kinds of lenses. So, some of them are going to have zooms this one just zooms inside, so that's anticlimactic, but it'll zoom and it'll get you a wider shot and it'll get you closer. And you might, keep on moving to a longer lens is what they call it, so that you can get even closer. So here's another example a couple of weeks ago. Whenever I preach that here's a wider shot, here's a medium shot, and a little bit closer shot. Now here's a good example of being prepared. So whenever Taylor was shooting that week, she knew that I was going to be using this example, and she wasn't out in kids ministry at that time. She wanted to make sure she didn't miss that moment that was going to be impactful. So she scheduled her shoot around that moment. So that's the kind of thing you want to think whenever you're thinking about the morning. What is the thing I have to capture today? What's one of the most important things that I want to make sure that I'm getting today? So that's kind of just some framing stuff, and we'll look at a little bit of that more in a second. Here's the next thing I want you to be thinking of. What makes a good image? So when you're thinking about what makes a good image, what makes an image that's worth keeping, that we're not going to delete, that's not just going to look average, it can be a wide, a medium, or a close shot, but you want to try to have these 3 things in it. And I'm going to go through these things and show you what happens if you only have one of them in a second. But you want to have good composition. What is composition? So good composition, if you were looking at this image, for instance, you want the subject to be, there's there's something called leading lines, where you're almost like everything in the photo is kind of pointing towards the thing you want to see. Sometimes it's lines in a landscape. Sometimes it's lines through, like for instance, in this close shot, Pastor Lance is between two heads that are watching him. So it's kind of like he's almost framed by those heads. So that's a composition that is purposeful. That is, when you look at each photo, you want the eyes to be drawn to the right thing. And then you're going to see some, like for this instance right here. Here's a bunch of different shots from kids ministry, and these are all really good shots, and you have a great composition right here with this kid right here in the center. You've got some good moments right here that we're capturing, and none of these are throwaway shots. This is a great shot too that we're looking. These are some great shots of people outside the church welcoming people, just being a part of the life, of the church. You've got some shots right here in the cafe area these are all good shots, and the reason that they're good shots is they're documenting the moment well, but they're exposed properly, they have good framing, and when you talk about composition, that's really what you're talking about, is framing. Where am I putting them on the screen? What is their purpose behind that? So those are some of the things that you want to be thinking about whenever you think about composition. Where is the subject in the frame? Does it make sense in the frame? And we'll go through something called the rule of thirds in a second. Moment. What's a good moment, okay? What do you think I mean whenever I say moment? It's pretty simple. Yes, you in the back with the hand.
Making sure it's like a good moment to capture, not just some like giant moving like blurry thing that like could be.
That's good. I'm glad you brought up blur, because we'll talk about that too in a second. But yeah, you want to capture the moment that makes the most sense for people to see. So I missed a moment Sunday because I was teaching Next Steps, and I run around or come back in right when Pastor Lance is like finishing praying for people. He's like grabbing everyone's hands and praying for them. And I like just missed it. I ran upstairs, I grabbed my camera, I came down, and he had just let go of the last hand. And I was like, I missed the moment. And it was like such a bummer, because I didn't know that was coming, but it was like such a cool moment that I missed. But you want to catch the moment. And here's why it matters whenever you're shooting at church. You're going to catch a lot of moments like right now. When you look at these preaching photos again, these are all pretty good faces, but I probably had 30 pictures of Pastor Lance on Sunday, and there were, like he was making weird faces. Yeah, you've got all these strange facial expressions in the middle of, you probably have to throw away 75% of speaking shots or singing shots, because they're odd. They're not flattering for that person, So you want to capture the perfect moment. That's why it's okay to shoot multiples. We're not shooting on film anymore. You can shoot as many as you want, although don't make it harder on the editor than it needs to be. I always say, like, shoot like you're shooting film, but check to make sure you got the shot. If you don't have the shot, keep shooting. Make sure that you get a good face. So you want to make sure that you capture in the moment. And then light. So you want to capture good light. So there's all kinds of shots that you could get that they're going to be good light, and by chance, sometimes they're going to be good light because you did it on purpose. Here's a shot that has a couple of things that make it good light. Now, it's going to be easy when you're shooting on stage because we set our light automatically to automatically look good. And one of the reasons it looks good is the faces are going to be well lit. So you're going to be able to capture the face. The camera is going to focus. If you don't have enough light, sometimes your camera may be hunting for focus and you'll be like so frustrated. You gotta have good front light. But then the other thing is, you see the rim of light around here that's like a colored light. Like that's our backlighting, and that really helps it. It gives it like a production quality to it, so it helps it to pop. Here's an image. Here's two images side by side. One of them has, I love the face from Miranda, but one of them has better light. It's the same exact location in our lobby, but this photo on the left, it's not quite as, even though I love the expression and I love the moment, so it's good composition and it's a good moment, but the lighting's not quite as good because the background's blown out, and then you've got a mixed color. You've got tungsten light on the front, which is like warm incandescent lights like this. So you're mixing daylight with that color. But if you just turn around, move the camera on the other side, now you're capturing you're getting better light on her face, on Izzy's face, and it's the same exact spot, but it's a position change so that you can take advantage of the light that's coming in. So
this one on the left, that's called a high key shot. because the high key meaning that the contrast between the subject and the background is so high, they call it a high key shot.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Eric. Okay, so composition, moment, and light. Try to think about those three things whenever you're capturing your image, and then whenever you're documenting a moment, try to think wide, medium, and close. I want to try to capture all of those things. So I'm going to move into kind of some technical side of things, and we're going to try to go through how to set the camera and what gets you a certain look, okay? Now, whenever you start shooting that way, it is good to learn how to shoot in full manual mode. It's good to understand every setting on your camera. Sometimes you can get away with shooting in aperture priority or shutter priority or program mode or something like that. But I would suggest spending the time to learn how to shoot in manual so that you know when you want to use it. Even if you're shooting in aperture priority, there's going to be certain things you want to change sometimes. Yes, sir?
Do you set up the camera for the photographer?
I normally do, but sometimes I forget.
How do you set it?
Normally I set the cameras on manual, but I'll put my ISO on auto. And it will kind of compensate, but I'll limit how far it can go. So I can show you guys that in a second. But manual can be intimidating. I'm going to let Eric come in and dig into that a little bit more, but I did want to show you this really important image that's going to speak a lot to manual mode. So yeah, sometimes we feel like this is the first time we shoot manual. How many of you guys saw the Super Bowl and the halftime show? When they were doing that part, I was like, this is going to get a lot of memes for sure. But yeah, sometimes it can feel like that when you're shooting manual. You're just not getting the look, and you're like, what do I do? How do I change my settings? How do I get this? So,
although that being said, that's a very interesting artistic look to me.
Did you watch it?
Seriously. Yeah, I did.
It was like pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I didn't think that scene was very interesting, but that photography is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I've got a few different things right here. This is the exposure triangle, and then Eric, if you'd like to come up and sit right here because I'm recording, just kind of walk us through what these three things do and what it helps us with. And if you see any slides here that are helpful, go ahead and use them.
So you got aperture priority, you got shutter priority, and then you got program setting. The program is the camera does everything for you. It controls your aperture, your shutter. As you can imagine, if you're in aperture priority, you control the aperture, and the camera takes care of everything else with the shutter speed. You could have an auto ISO setting, and it would also take care of that. Or if you want your camera to shoot at a specific ISO, oftentimes in my industry, we'll keep it really low to reduce noise in the image, because the higher the ISO setting, like you get up above 6400 ISO, you're going to reduce a lot more noise.
There's a good example of it right here.
Yeah, 3200. Oh, that's because it must be a Nikon. But my camera is 6400. At 6400, it's not even that grainy actually. It's 6400. But so that's ISO setting that can affect the graininess and your shot.
Mm-hmm.
So this is aperture. Now, in the industry, you might sometimes hear somebody. Are you asking a question? Go ahead.
Sometimes don't you want it kind of grainy though, depending on like the theme of the
Yes,
picture?
that can be a look that you're trying to capture, but that's an artistic look. And one of the things I would tell new people when it comes to photography is figure out how to make it look the best. Learn how to make it look right. Learn how to do everything right.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you know how to do it right, then you can mess around with things like graininess. Even when it comes to the masters, when they were learning how to paint, when I was studying painting, they learned how to be the best painter that everybody of their era knew, and the technology of their era. They would become the best at the technique, the color mixing, and the style. And then from there, they would go and they would be crazy. They might do more impressionist look, or they might do it a little more distorted. So it's the same thing in photography. Learn how to do it right, the best that you can as anybody else, and then from there, you can get more creative, like adding in noise at a specific time to create a specific effect. If you're on aperture priority, you have control of this. Well, why would you want control of it? Well, because that's where you could start being artistic. Because with a faster lens comes a shallower depth of field. So if you're trying to create an image of faster lens, and you want everything in the background to be kind of soft and blurry, oh, thank you. You'd want to stop down to a faster setting, 1.8, 2.8. F4, you're starting to create a pretty large depth of field. Depth of field. That's simply the distance. Oh man, you got all the slides. You are on it. That is just simply the distance of everything is in focus. Do you have a hyperfocal slide? Okay. Well, the depth of field is going to be, so the lower the setting, F16, is going to give you a wider depth of field. And as you stop it down, the depth of field is going to get smaller and smaller. So you can use that artistically to separate your subject from its background. And that will then create, if you get a really nice fast setting like 2.8 and slower, you can get, which is probably my favorite word in the industry, you can get really nice bokeh, which is a Japanese word for basically the blur.
Like BOCA?
It's a bokeh. It's B-O-K-E-H.
K-E-H.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's bokeh, and it's a Japanese word, and it's different. It's basically the blur. And it's just really pleasing to the, I mean, don't you find that pleasing to your eye?
Well,
I do.
It makes him pop.
It makes him pop. It's almost like he's 3D. He comes off the image because of that nice bokeh behind him and the depth of field use there. You know, in other times like this one here, the depth of field's he had a lot larger aperture, probably more like 5.6 or f8, so he could capture all this action that was going on in the image also, and get the whole band in the triangle here of his subject and all focused together. That's why you would want to control the aperture, because then you can control the image and how it looks. So go ahead and go back to that triangle. Shutter speed. If you're on shutter priority, you are in control of the shutter, and everything else is, well, this is only automatic if you're on auto ISO, which we tend to run the cameras here this way, and that makes sense. I'm coming more from in the field operations where I operate more more so than in events. Really, Josh is the expert here when it comes to event shooting and the videography, but I'm getting better at that.
Yeah, you are.
So this would be shutter priority. And so why would we want to control shutter speed? Because the higher the number, 1/1000ths, 1/500ths, these are getting slower. This is shutter speed getting slower. It gets blurrier with action. So generally you want to be at least 1/60th of a second to stop most medium action, 1/25th. The other thing too is if you're having blur issues with your lens, it's most likely wrapped around the shutter speed. So if you are, say you're shooting a 50 millimeter lens, you're going to want your shutter speed to be at least 1/250th of a, or 1/25th of a second. Generally speaking, about twice what your focal length is.
There's three things affect how much is in focus: your aperture, your proximity to the subject, and the focal length. So those three things you kind of have to calculate. But to answer your question, as far as our church photography, this is a wide angle shot that we got this weekend. And this shot, pretty much when we're shooting here, I only shoot at 2.8. We don't really move it off of 2.8. But
Not super far away.
yeah, but if something was right here in front of the lens could have focused on that and got everything out of focus, and it could have messed up the shot. But in this case, I focused on LJ on the stage, and if something up here was out of focus, it's fine. But for the most part, for this setup, normally just shoot in 2.8. But it's because it's so dark in that room. Yes, sir.
So, just back to the shutter.
Yeah.
So, if you're getting a picture at nighttime, if everything is still changing, and the shutter to be a lot slower would be the way to go without losing quality.
This is how you get, it's a good question, that's how you get this kind of image. So when you slow your shutter speed down enough, yes, light painting is something that you do with the slow shutter. But this camera, I can tell by the aperture, by these lights, it's probably somewhere around f20. So this is probably a 20-second exposure or so.
He's getting diffraction in here because of that, but that's what
Yeah.
he's trying to get a little bit of starch.
Does that mean they basically take like 20 seconds and let the lights like do their thing, and then like basically then they
Yeah.
take the image,
You-
and then the light gets smeared
Yeah.
across the screen over the 20-second basis of
That's-
exposure?
That's a really good question. So like Eric was saying, all these things affect each other, this triangle. Your shutter speed, your aperture is how big your eye is. So imagine the iris on your eye opens whenever it's dark and it closes when it gets bright outside. That's what the camera eye is doing inside the lens. Shutter speed is how long your shutter is open, how much light it's allowing in for a certain amount of time. And then your ISO is how sensitive your sensor is to light. So those three things combined give you an exposure. So when you want something on a long exposure, that's going to be a shutter speed thing. But here's a problem that you run into when it comes to shooting here at the church. So I have a couple of shots right here I wanted to show you. So this first shot doesn't look quite as bad right here, but when you zoom in to it, you can tell my shutter speed was a little too slow this weekend. So I tried to shoot that, and I did get one that was in focus, but I had to look at it and say, oh man, I missed it. I missed focus because she was moving just barely, or I was moving just barely. And I think I was probably at 1/25th of a second or something like that. And it was just too long of a lens because I was shooting at 180 for that. But here's the problem that we have on our stage with our lights. So this image, even though it might not look that bad right here, the lights that are in the back, you see the lines in the lights?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to see that.
Or it's like dragged in.
Yeah, when you have a cheaper LED light, basically the way an LED light works, instead of a constant, like a tungsten light bulb is basically like on fire. And it's organic, it's lit up, it's no matter how
It's real.
slow your shutter speed or fast, you're gonna see you're gonna see it. But this is a digital signal being sent in patterns constantly. So a cheaper LED is going to send it slower. If you ever seen like really cheap Christmas lights, sometimes out of the corner of your eye you can see like this pulsing, and it's like, oh, it's freaking me, it's weirding me out.
It's like vibrating.
Yeah, it's a weird look. Well, your camera will pick that up. So some of the lights in our church are just they're LED, but they're not like a high production quality LED. So if you're not careful with your shutter speed, you're going to get some banding. So I showed you these earlier, and maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, but you can see some banding in their heads right here, and that's the room lights. That's the hanging lights. My shutter speed was a little too fast. So I got the exposure, but I got the exposure the wrong way. So you kind of have to be careful with your shutter speed when you're shooting in there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a couple of things about framing, and then we're going to wrap up. One other thing I want to show you, just tech stuff that you need to know about your camera. If you're shooting in RAW, this doesn't matter quite as much, but every light is a different, they call it temperature, even though it's not how it feels, it's how it looks. So when you're talking about temperature, a guy with the last name of Kelvin, I don't remember, do you know his name?
I don't know his
Something
first
Kelvin.
name, but Kelvin was his last, yeah.
So he developed a system to judge the color of light. And when it's really blue, he's got like a clear blue sky, will be like 10,000 K. So when you're looking at the bright blue sky that we see every now and then here, that's about 10,000 K. But when you're looking at candlelight, you're looking at somewhere around 1,800 K. So the lower that number is, the warmer it is, the higher it is, the more blue it is. The reason that matters is when you're shooting right here in the auditorium, we are shooting with a light bulb that is about 3,200 K. So that's somewhere in here, and it's around, tungsten is 3,000. So we're shooting somewhere around that color, which is similar to the color we're seeing on these bulbs. But when you move into the lobby color is somewhere around 5,500 K. So it's going to be a different color. So you want to, your camera, I just leave these set on auto white balance because you can change that when you shoot RAW in later. But if you're shooting video, you really want to know.
Critical.
Yeah, because it's a lot harder to get that color close to what you want. So you want to keep in mind white balance does matter, especially when you're shooting in video.
Well, when you're shooting video, you can't, if you wanted to make it look proper, you wouldn't shoot in auto color or auto
Yeah.
temperature. Because the scene will change within the video and it just doesn't look very good. If you're shooting one scene and it's set and then suddenly it starts changing color as you move into another scene. So when you're shooting video, it's more critical that you're on manual temperature setting.
So here's a couple things you need to know about to get creative. There's going to be a couple things that you want to play around with. Perspective is one of them. Your perspective is the angle or the proximity to something that you are to tell a story. So let's look at this image, for instance. This is Evan playing electric guitar. This is a pretty generic, vanilla shot of him just, from stage. It's a medium shot. He's not even framed properly. It's not that great. I'm pretty sure I took this image. So it's not that good. But for Christmas, I've got this shot of him. Now, this shot to me is a lot more interesting. Now, it's interesting to me, and you can notice there's a few things that are different. This shot was probably shot at 180 millimeters, far away, doesn't feel personal, there's no action in the shot. This shot was shot at 17 millimeters, right up against his guitar, and it's like, whoa, this is like, I feel like he's in my face. Like, I feel like you can almost feel the rock happening,
Yeah,
like
the guitar is distorted by the focal length.
Yeah, his guitar's not shaped like that.
And
but
it's not that big compared to his
Yeah,
head.
exactly. But it's an interesting shot because of it feels like you're in it. So
I agree.
I think whenever you're shooting, you want to think whenever you're shooting about shots like this. If you want a shot like this, I didn't get this during service. I'm not going to walk up on stage while we're having service and distract you. I got this before. So if you want to get creative with close-up shots, it's a great idea to show up early and get those shots on stage beforehand and like really stretch and push the limits beforehand. And that way, you can kind of experiment a little bit more during those times.
And that looks like it's in the middle of a service.
Yeah, it looks like it. You can't tell. Here's another perspective shot that is really cool. This is a very intimate looking shot. So Taylor's playing her harp, or she's tuning it right here in this moment, and our photographer that day, whoever grabbed the shot, got a close-up shot. It's very soft focus in the background. You feel like you were like in the moment with her.
The aperture's open wide.
Yeah, so it's that's a completely different shot than this, right? And that's cool. I want you to learn like
This one's stopped down quite a bit because the screen's you can almost see the screen way in the background.
Yeah.
And that also has to do because of the focal length too being so wide. Just even at f11, you can get a lot more depth of field.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure I shot this at 2.8. I don't change it.
Yeah.
So if I did, that shows like to Eric's point how much just your perspective and like how wide you're shooting changes what's in focus.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Let me show you some composition things right here. So this is the rule of thirds, okay? So this shot that we grabbed of LJ this Sunday, if you imagine your screen, and you can set most cameras today with a thirds tic-tac-toe screen on your screen to help you to get this. So normally, you want to imagine these quadrants on your screen so that it can help you to frame someone. Now he's looking off to the side right now, so I want him to be on one of these vertical lines. Normally this top line, I'm going to want to put his mouth or face somewhere around there. This is not breaking the rules. This is the rules, okay? You can, when you want to break it, like you got to know why to break it. And I've seen some very interesting framing in movies or interviews that break it, and it's like, oh, that's so cool. I love what they did, but it makes sense. But this one right here, this is kind of the framing you're looking for, okay? Now, let me show you a couple of examples. If I had framed him on this side, what does it make you feel whenever you're looking at that? Yeah.
It feels like you're not the main part of it. Instead, the main part is typically in the center.
It also is breaking another rule called breathing room. So when you are shooting someone who's looking in a certain direction, you want to give them space to breathe. When I look at this, I feel like I'm suffocating because I feel like, oh, where's he going? Like I don't know what he's looking at. I don't get a sense of the story. Now there's going to be a time when you shoot like that, but it is breaking a rule to shoot like that. There's going to be time for it. But when you look at it right here, it feels like I've got space, so when Pastor Lance is walking around, if you guys run camera, whenever he's starting to walk in one direction, I want to make sure that he's not falling behind and on that side of the frame, because it makes it feel like he's not, like I can't breathe. It makes it feel like we're behind the action. But if he starts turning in that direction, move the camera a little. If he turns in this direction, give him a little bit of space there. If you're shooting a photo and you're looking left to right, give him some space. That's called breathing room. Here's another example of poor framing right here. I have seen some creative expressions of this, and it could look cool. But to me, why do I need to see all that? There's nothing happening up there. There's nothing happening back here. If I want to capture the story and I'm just trying to generically tell the story in a good, well-rounded way, I'm not going to shoot like this. So a lot of times I'll end up cropping images or throwing images out because they're just framed poorly. When we talked about composition earlier, that's one of the things you want to look for. Sometimes our photographers, they might frame instead of the head or mouth up here, it's way down here and it's just wasted space. I can't even tell he's playing the guitar. I don't know what he's doing. But right here, I can tell, I see what's going on. He's leading worship from a guitar. Just a couple of tips I wanted to leave you guys with, and then we're going to wrap up. One of the things is, we try to urge people, if you're shooting, especially in this environment, wear black so that you can disappear. Sometimes the reason that you don't get a close enough shot or the shot that you want to get is because you're afraid that people are going to see you and distract people. When you blend in and you're wearing black, it's a lot easier to go where you want to go, where people don't even notice that you're there sometimes. Jaden?
So are we allowed to go behind the stage, or is that off limits?
You can go behind the stage. You can. What I would urge you to do if you're going behind stage, you can come up on those stairs and kind of shoot in that direction and shoot with a worship leader in that direction. But if you want to get on the stage, even from the live camera that you run a lot of times, you're welcome to get that kind of a shot. Pastor Lance doesn't have a problem with that, but we just want to make sure that the focus of that day is that moment, the worship or the message or whatever. And
It's not disruptive.
yeah, as long as it's not disruptive, we want to help to tell the story. There are people watching online, and if that kind of a shot helps to tell the story, then that's okay. It's fine to do it as long as we're not pulling the attention to you. So a couple of examples of why you would go on stage is Baptism Sunday. You want to be on stage. So you want to get some shots where people are being baptized. You want to be close. If we have a baby dedication Sunday or a send-off Sunday or something like that, it's okay to get in a little bit closer to the action. If there's an illustration or something happening on the stage that you need a close-up of, those are great moments for that. If a worship leader or someone doing ministry is laying hands or praying on people and they're rushing to the front, that might be a cool shot to get a different perspective. So, just like Eric's saying, you want to have purpose in the shot. Why are you going on stage?
That's a great idea. If there's a lot of people in the front, like altar time, that could be a really good time to be on stage.
Yeah, cool. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you guys.